Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this video is going to be all about the tier 10 Japanese heavy tank, the Type 5 Heavy, and more importantly, how it has been buffed massively on the 9.17.1 test server, and also how it now has the biggest derp gun on any heavy tank in the game. So before we get stuck into the gameplay to see what that super derp is going to be capable of, let me show you what else has changed with the Type 5 Heavy. And apart from the gun, everything remains the same on the tank apart from one key aspect. Look at the armor. In 9.17, the Type 5 Heavy has 260mm at the front of the hull, 260 at the front of the turret, and 140 on the side of the hull. In 9.17.1, it is going to have 270 on the front of the hull, 280 on the front of the turret, and 160 on the side. When we look at the turret armor, we can see that previously the Type 5 Heavy had these 260mm weak cheeks that most tier 10 tanks were pretty much a 50-50 whether they would go through. In 9.17.1, we can see that these are in fact going to be 280mm, lowering the chance for the Type 5 Heavy to penetrate itself in the cheeks from 38.8% all the way down to 22.6%. The mid plate as well, as we can see, has got thicker from 260 up to 270. And one interesting thing is that in 9.17, the Type 5 Heavy had these two cylinders that stuck out on the front of the tank. And this hitbox actually allowed you to penetrate the Type 5 Heavy from the front as it came round a corner and also detrack it. However, in 9.17.1, we can see that these parts of the armor have just been omitted entirely, and so you're going to be safer than ever to come round the corner and expose your lower plate. Because look at the armor thickness when it's angled like this, 350mm, certainly is simply incredible. But the main benefit to the Type 5 Heavy is that this weak point on the side of the cheeks is now going to be completely gone. Experienced players will know when you're playing in the Type 5 Heavy that you have to angle it to make your frontal armor be able to ricochet most of the shells that hit it, but when you did that, you exposed this side plate here, which as it's angled at pretty much 45 degrees meant that it became a really big, easy weak point to shoot at, which only required 210mm of penetration to get through it when it's flat. However, in 9.17.1, this plate is going to be as thick as the front of the tank, up to 270, and so really this is no longer going to be a weak point unless you're firing premium rounds at this vehicle and it is completely flat onto you. One other gigantic thing for the Type 5 Heavy is that the side armor on the upper part of the tank is now 160mm thick, so when you're angling at 45 degrees, that's pretty much 300mm of effective armor, whereas previously when we look at it from this angle, it was down to about 250. And furthermore, this whole area just above the inside of the front of the tracks has been buffed from 105mm, and look how weak that was. Even tier 8 tanks would easily be able to penetrate that. Now it is being buffed up to 140mm, significantly reducing the amount of high explosive damage you'll take if somebody shoots you here. And also when you angle it effectively like this, it's now going up to 300mm of protection pretty much over the entirety of the front of the tank, which is absolutely crazy. That means that tier 8 tanks, even with premium rounds, are never going to be able to penetrate the front of the Type 5 Heavy. And most tier 9 tanks, even with premium rounds, are never going to penetrate the front of the Type 5 Heavy. And tier 10 tanks with about 250mm of penetration are only going to have about a 10 to 15% chance at best to be able to get through the front of this behemoth. So this means there's going to be more reason than ever to be shooting at the cupola of the Type 5 Heavy. But really, this isn't a guaranteed weak point on the tank. If you hit this central lower part here, it's still got about 250mm of effective armor. And as the Type 5 Heavy is quite a tall tank, you're often having to shoot up at it, and it increases its effective armor. And if the vehicle is using the 10 degrees of gun depression that it has, well, good luck trying to snipe up at that cupola. But really, apart from that, you have no option over the whole of the front of the Type 5 Heavy when it's angling like this, which is just absolutely crazy. So now we know that the armor on the Type 5 Heavy has been buffed so much that it's probably going to be the most heavily armored tank in the game along with the mouse. Let's take a look at the new Armament, this 15cm gun that you have to research with 64,600 experience. Well, it doesn't have the best rate of fire, 3 rounds a minute, but at least that's not tragic. And interestingly enough, it has 75mm of high explosive penetration. And one thing that is very interesting about that is it's not really a lot when we think about it. There are plenty of tier 10 tank destroyers with such high explosive guns. For example, the Object 263 has 90mm of penetration and it has the same 1,100 100 alpha damage with its 152mm gun as the Type 5 Heavy does, and so in theory it should be doing more with high explosive rounds. And furthermore, you will have 0.33 accuracy rather than the god-awful 0.5 accuracy on the Type 5 Heavy, with your aim time being slightly better. And that's one thing we should mention, is the aim time on the Type 5 Heavy isn't too bad at 2.9 seconds. And there are certainly a lot of derp guns in the game, such as on the KV2, which a lot of people really enjoy, that have a hell of a lot longer aim time and a lot worse accuracy. The thing that's absolutely bizarre about this gun is that it gets two variants of high explosive rounds. And both of these high explosive rounds have the same caliber, the same penetration, the same burst radius, which is how far you can splash your damage onto your opponents, but they certainly don't have the same alpha damage, with the premium rounds having just 300 extra damage, which is something that I personally think is really lame because they cost over 5,000 credits extra if you want to fire them. And so effectively, Wargaming is asking you, do you want to spend an extra 5,000 credits a shot? Because if you do, well, you're going to do about 27% more damage, which is absolutely bizarre because pretty much all of the other premium rounds which have increased damage in the game, especially at the high tiers, have drawbacks. For example, if we look at the FV215B183's Mammoth gun, if you want to fire premium rounds on this tank to deal a whopping 600 extra damage, you've got to sacrifice 80mm of penetration. And I really feel like that should almost be the same case on this gun, maybe reduce the penetration of the round significantly. And so you load premium rounds to take out really softly armored targets. And as this is a test server, I certainly hope that this is an oversight by Wargaming, because really, there's no point in firing the standard ammunition in this tank, so you might as well pay to win and just do an extra 25% damage. But keep in mind, this will be an extraordinarily expensive way to play this tank. When I've been playing my Type 5 Heavy on the test server, I've quite frequently fired between 8 and 10 rounds a game, and a 64,000 credit bill for ammunition is certainly going to make you hemorrhage credits at tier 10 if you want to play this tank to its optimum capabilities. But then again, this is the first iteration of the test server, and I truly hope Wargaming address this. So let's take a look at a round where I don't dip into my pockets and fire premium rounds on Prokhorovka. So here we go, we're playing on Prokhorovka, and of course I'm super lucky that there are no artillery on the enemy team, because, you know, the natural counter for this vehicle, which is pretty much impenetrable frontally, unless they get pretty lucky, or I'd say they're a tier 10 tank destroyer. The natural counter is going to be the artillery, obviously. Those high explosive rounds do take away your hit points still fairly quickly. I think you're probably going to lose about maybe 500 hit points even if they hit the frontal part of your armor from every tier 10 self-propelled gun that hits you. But luckily, no self-propelled guns for us here on Prokhorovka. So there are many positions where you want to be taking the Type 5 Heavy in this kind of a matchup when there are no artillery on the enemy team. One of the positions could be going on top of the hill, where we see the Kranvang, the IS-7, the WZ-111-14 and the T-110E5 making their way. But I personally think that holding this location is going to be super important on an encounter. Usually on an encounter on Prokhorovka, the enemy's tank destroyers will not tend to go down the west so much, because obviously they have to try and get towards the cap circle. And what you see is, instead of tank destroyers locating themselves over here at A1, B1, C1, eventually pushing their way down if they get light tanks up into the bushes to be able to spot for them, the tank destroyers are instead making their way more towards the island over here, hoping that the enemy team is going to plow their way over the hill, but more likely they're going to be sitting at the AB area here along the 6th line, trying to snipe out at any tanks that advance here, or any tanks that maybe foolishly advance too far up onto the hill, where they're going to be able to engage them. So I've already lost my gun in the Type 5 Heavy, and that's something that frequently happened with this tank. Obviously the gun is rather large, and the amount of high explosive rounds that people have been firing at this tank when they find that they're just incapable of penetrating with their armor piercing, heat, or even APCR rounds, they do fire at the gun quite a lot and take it out. And so I'm definitely going to be taking the gunner skill, I believe, is it Armourer, on this tank, to try and maximize my accuracy even when my gun is damaged. There you go. One derp round into the Kranvang, and when you're using high explosive rounds, it is rather satisfying to know that even though we only dealt, I guess, like 158 damage to that guy there, or was it even less? No, sorry, 14 damage to that guy. Even though we dealt a very small amount of damage to him, it was still satisfying that we know we're going to take him out. And just look at the damage that we dealt to the IS-7 turret earlier as well. Was that 139? Well, that certainly isn't going to kill an IS-7 very quickly, is it? I'm going to run out of time before I manage to kill him. So currently there's a 113 on the enemy team who's shooting us from the hill, and I decide to use my repair kit to be able to get the full accuracy at that Jagdpanzer 100, who's a pretty long range. We hit the side of his tank and we deal 435 damage to him. And now we can see the 121 is bouncing heat ammunition off us. Actually, the 113 has been firing AP rounds and the 121 has been firing heat rounds. Now the difference between that is obviously one's got about 260 millimeters of penetration, the other one has about 330 millimeters of penetration, but all still ricocheting off this tank. The vehicle is certainly holding up very well indeed. We even bounce a gorilla on the other side, and we launch one at the front of the Foch 155. I was hoping that we might be able to hit the cupola or the viewports that are on top of that tank, and maybe be able to do some significant damage to it. But instead, dealing 326. So far I think I'm up to 914 damage dealt, and I've been playing this round for 3.5 minutes. Yeah, now the question is how much would I have done if I'd been using the 14 centimeter gun, the 140 millimeter on this vehicle with its 260 millimeters of penetration and 600 alpha damage? Well, I think I probably would have been able to pen the Foch's cupola there. He was sitting very stationary, and I think I would have gone through the side of the Jagdpanzer 100, and I probably would have gone through the side of the Kranvang turret as well. But I probably wouldn't have been able to shoot at that IS-7, for example. So I think I'd probably be sitting around maybe about 1,200 damage so far, possibly a little bit higher than that, including the well, no, not the IS-7 bounce, including the Kranvang side turret penetration. But this gun may still have some fight in its left later on. That's one of the important things that I've been trying to think about is, when firing standard ammunition, which gun is superior? And there we go, a gorilla in the distance. Will we be able to hit him? Remember, he has got no armor on his turret, and we have 1,100 alpha damage if we manage to penetrate. Now, this is where this gun does do a lot better. The initial hit against the FV215B183 did 514 damage, and I didn't even really have to fully aim at him. So the high explosive splash at the side of that tank did the same as what an AP would have done, pretty much, but it looks like the splash also damaged all of his modules, setting him on fire for 344 burning, finishing him off pretty much in half of his hit points taken away in a single shot there. Now the RU-251 is shooting, but I'm really not worried about him penetrating me, and the gorilla looks like he ricochets off my cupola, which is a great result. Angled like this, the RU-251 pretty much has no chance of penetrating me, and even the heat rounds from the SDB-1 are bouncing off us. So I've managed to get myself into a position where I'm really trying to bait those tanks over the hill, the ridge, because I think if they come over the ridge, that means that my team are going to be able to shoot them down from the hill. But finally, a round goes in to the top of the cupola. The gorilla manages to penetrate it. And this gorilla, you know what, he's playing a seriously dangerous game right now. And that was an AP round that the gorilla penetrated with. And there you go, the IS-7 pops up, Kranvang takes him out, and I'm just providing the spotting role for my team here. 3,500 damage spotted for my team so far, or tracked, and we're close to 6,000 damage blocked. It's so amazing to think that I can just completely ignore that RU-251 at this kind of range, even if he's firing heat rounds at me because of the armor buffs to this tank. Oh, come on! Really, the opportunity of doing a fantastic amount of damage to that gorilla just makes that miss ultra painful. But we'll have to see if we manage to hit him. But it's just, I think that with the previous armor layout of the turret of this tank, I don't think I'd be ricocheting so many shells. The gorilla's now got so frustrated of bouncing his armor-piercing rounds that he's now loading his heat rounds. But luckily the gorilla doesn't actually have exceptional penetration with its premium rounds, unlike a lot of tier 10 tank destroyers, and so he's still ricocheting off. Oh, we miss again. The 0.5 accuracy of this gun showing its ugly head right now. And the gorilla manages to penetrate a heat round. Does it hit my cupola? Yes, it does. It hits me in the cupola flush. So I'm still loading standard ammunition. Will we be able to hit the gorilla here? Come on. Oh, finally. There we go. 1,024 damage done to the gorilla, and this RU obviously got frustrated about bouncing all of his rounds at long range. Let's reverse. Got to try and stop him from getting my side. Now he's got my side, I need to turn the tracks and the turret in the same direction. He ricochets a heat round. He tries to stop to avoid my shell, but it's too little too late, and we deal with that pesky RU-251 before he managed to get our flank. So what a difference a hit on a Grilla will make to your Type 5 heavy game, right guys? Now up to 2,886 damage, adding on an extra 50% for this battle, and we've ricocheted 7,300 damage. I have to admit, from here on, the game isn't too exciting, but look at our spotting as well, 4,000 spotting. And look at all the heat rounds that were hitting our vehicle as well. Sure, some of them weren't very high caliber like on the RU-251, but managing to bounce the heat rounds from the Grilla at least half the time off the cupola certainly is nice. Will we hit this bat chat? Oh, come on, we missed the turret there. 1 heat ricochet from the bat chat, 2 heat ricochets from the bat chat, 3 heat ricochets from the bat chat. When you angle your armor like this thing is just an absolute god. Right now, from this angle, he would have to be hitting this location to be able to penetrate. I think that even the upper mid plate of this tank and the lower plate will be able to easily ricochet his heat rounds. And remember, unless he hits you in this little box here, you've got lots of very thick spaced armor that covers the tank, and also now this mega buffed side armor that has gone up to 140 millimeters, I believe, from 105 millimeters, making the Type 5 heavy, I guess, the super heavy that it probably was always meant to be. And just because I know you guys love big hits, well, let's see what happens when we shoot the FV4005. Oh yeah, 961 damage dealt to that tier 10 British tank destroyer. Just a few extra seconds to reload. Will we be able to hit him again? Oh, come on. Oh, look, he gives us the side of his turret. Two-shotting that tier 10 British tank destroyer. And here's another one against the side of a TVP for you. Gosh, 1,013 damage dealt with the standard ammunition. And remember, it might be tempting with a quick dab of that 2 key. You're just going to be increasing the damage that you deal with pretty much all of your shots by 25% on average, and allowing you to get one shots at 1,400 on a variety of vehicles. So here was our round on Prokhorovka. It was a first class mastery badge. We got a patrol duty and unsurprisingly a steel wall medal for the 8,480 damage that we blocked and that 4,000 spotting for our team. But our damage, it's okay, but it wasn't really impressive, 2,886. And if we hadn't hit that Grilla for 1,024 damage, then we would have been sub 2k in quite a long-winded game, which certainly isn't impressive for a tier 10 heavy tank. One interesting thing as well is that the detailed report is showing a bugged amount of profit that we made. Here is a screenshot from that game. 25,000 credits profit, fairly decent indeed. But now factor in if those 12 rounds that we fired had been premium. That would have cost us 60,000 credits extra, and so instead of making 25,000 credits profit, we would have lost 35,000 credits profit. But arguably, our damage total would have been higher, and for a lot of people, that matters far more than how many credits you spend in the battle. Here's another game which shows you the kind of result that you'll be having in the Type 5 heavy in the future. 27 hits received, of which most of them were premium rounds, 7,380 damage blocked, and I hit half my shells, dealing 2,362 damage with the 5 shots combined. And one of those was pretty much destroying a TVP, where we did 1,100 damage to him in a single shot, but it required an additional 2 rounds to be able to kill him. And so this derp gun on the Type 5 heavy certainly isn't going to be the best gun in every single situation, but it certainly allows you to irritate the enemy tanks, even the very heavily armored ones, by doing consistent damage to them, even if they're super heavily armored. One thing is for certain, that irrelevant of the gun that you choose to use on the Type 5 heavy, in patch 9.17.1, if things stay the same as they currently are on the test server, this vehicle is going to be a frontal monster, and you're not really going to be able to penetrate this tank frontally with standard ammunition anymore unless you hit the cupola cleanly. And that should certainly mean that we're going to see a hell of a lot more of these vehicles on the battlefield. And I think that the Type 5 heavy is probably going to be one of the best heavy tanks in the game for players who don't really feel comfortable with super accurate sniping. All you really have to do is to put your reticle over the central mass of the tank, click, and you're still going to do consistent damage anywhere you hit the vehicle. While you're certainly going to do better if you aim at the weak parts of the enemy tank when you use your derp guns, the Type 5 heavy allows you to still do really well without any knowledge of weak points of the enemy vehicles. And so in my opinion, these two additions make the Type 5 heavy the most friendly tank at tier 10 to begin playing the game with. And so hopefully you enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please consider giving it a like. It really helps helps the channel out, and let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Type 5 Heavy. Do you think that it looks like it's going to be completely overpowered if the changes remain as they are? And what do you think about this DURP gun? Do you think it is the most competitive gun on the vehicle, better than the 140mm? And what do you feel about the fact that the premium rounds on this tank just deal an extra 25% damage, but they cost you an extra 5,000 credits? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.